Your body is breaking down, and you don't know why. Explained right now, at this very moment, something is happening inside your body that no symptom is warning you about. A process has already begun, one that affects over 60% of adults worldwide according to the World Health Organization, and it started years before any doctor would ever catch it on a routine test. You woke up this morning. You probably felt a little tired, maybe a little stiff. Maybe your stomach has been off lately, or your mind feels slower than it used to. You wrote it off. You blamed work, or age, or stress. But here is the truth that nobody sat you down to explain. Those sensations are not random. They are signals from a body that is under attack, and the attacker is not a virus. It is not a genetic flaw. It is the life you are living every single day, right now, in ways you were never taught to recognize. According to research published by the National Institutes of Health, chronic low-grade inflammation, invisible, silent, and slow, is now identified as the underlying driver of the 7 leading causes of death globally. 7. And most people carrying it have no idea it is there. So what is actually happening inside you, and why has nobody told you? In this video, you are going to find out exactly what is causing your body to break down from the inside, not in theory, but with real biological mechanisms and real published science. By the time this video ends, you will know what chronic low-grade inflammation actually is, and why standard blood tests miss it entirely. You will understand the 4 daily habits silently accelerating the damage. You will know 5 physical warning signs your body has already been sending you. And you will have 4 evidence-based strategies that the research shows can genuinely reverse the process. Most people will never hear this explained clearly, not because the science does not exist, but because the system is not designed to deliver it to you before damage is done. Stay until the end, because the final point will completely change the way you live your daily life. Here is what is actually happening inside your body right now. Your immune system runs a continuous surveillance operation. Every single second, it sends out chemical signals called cytokines, molecules that tell your white blood cells where to go and what to attack. In a healthy body, this system fires up, destroys a threat, and shuts down. The inflammation rises, does its job, and resolves. That is acute inflammation, and it is one of the most brilliant mechanisms in human biology. But something has changed. For a growing number of people, according to research from Harvard Medical School, estimated at roughly 92 million adults in the United States alone, this inflammatory response never fully shuts off. The alarm stays on, not at full blast but at a low, constant hum. Researchers call this state chronic low-grade inflammation, and it is now recognized as the biological root of conditions ranging from heart disease and type 2 diabetes to depression, Alzheimer's disease, and cancer. Here is why it is so dangerous. Unlike a fever or a swollen ankle, chronic low-grade inflammation produces no obvious pain. You cannot feel it. Your standard annual blood panel will not catch it unless your doctor specifically orders a high-sensitivity C-reactive protein test, a test that most routine checkups do not include. So the damage accumulates silently for years, sometimes decades, while you feel merely off, tired, foggy. Not quite right. Think of it like a slow leak in the foundation of a building. On the surface, everything looks normal. The walls are standing. The lights are on. But underground, water is eating away at the concrete. By the time the cracks appear on the surface, the damage has been building for a long time. This is what is happening at the cellular level in your body. The cytokines that were designed to protect are now circulating continuously, damaging the lining of your blood vessels, disrupting your insulin receptors, interfering with your brain's chemical signaling, and accelerating what scientists call cellular aging, the shortening of telomeres, the protective caps on your DNA. The specific systems most affected are your cardiovascular system, your metabolic system, and your central nervous system. And the research on how this damage unfolds is both fascinating and deeply alarming. Let us go there now. The long-term damage of chronic inflammation is something most patients only discover after a diagnosis has already arrived. A landmark study published in Nature Medicine, involving over 44,000 participants across 14 countries, found that elevated inflammatory markers, specifically interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein, were present on average 5 to 7 years before the onset of a major chronic illness. 5 to 7 years of measurable biological damage, with the patient completely unaware. When inflammatory cytokines circulate persistently through your bloodstream, they begin eroding the endothelium, the thin single-cell lining of your arteries. This lining is your first line of defense against plaque formation. Once it is damaged, LDL cholesterol particles do not simply float past, they embed into the arterial wall. The immune system detects them as a threat and sends more inflammatory cells to the site. Those cells become foam cells, and foam cells are the structural foundation of atherosclerotic plaques, the blockages that cause heart attacks and strokes. According to the American Heart Association, cardiovascular disease remains the #1 cause of death globally, and researchers now widely agree that inflammation, not cholesterol alone, is the primary trigger. A study published in The Lancet found that patients with elevated high-sensitivity C-reactive protein had nearly double the risk of a cardiac event, even when cholesterol levels appeared normal. Inflammation inside the brain is now one of the most active areas of research in neuroscience. The brain has its own immune cells called microglia. Under normal conditions, they clean up debris and protect neurons. But when systemic inflammation is chronically elevated, microglia become overactivated. They begin attacking healthy neural tissue. Research from Johns Hopkins University has linked this microglial overactivation to accelerated cognitive decline, memory disruption, and a significantly increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. A study in the journal JAMA Neurology found that individuals with the highest inflammatory markers in midlife were 43% more likely to develop dementia decades later. Inflammatory cytokines, specifically tumor necrosis factor alpha, interfere directly with insulin receptor signaling. When your insulin receptors cannot communicate properly, your cells stop responding to insulin's instructions to absorb glucose. Your pancreas produces more insulin to compensate. Over time, this leads to insulin resistance, the precursor to type 2 diabetes, which the CDC reports now affects over 37 million Americans, with another 96 million in the pre-diabetic range. And here is the part that should concern you most. All three of these systems, your heart, your brain, your metabolism, are being damaged simultaneously, not sequentially, at the same time, right now. And the habits driving this process are ones you engage in every single day. Let us talk about the specific habits that are making this worse. Every single day habits you probably think are completely harmless. The first habit is eating ultra-processed food daily. What most people think is that it fills them up, gives them energy, and is fine in moderation. What it actually does at the cellular level is this. Ultra-processed foods trigger the release of lipopolysaccharides from gut bacteria. These are endotoxins. When they cross the gut lining into the bloodstream, the immune system responds as if the body is under bacterial attack. This triggers a rapid spike in inflammatory cytokines. A study published in Cell found that diets high in ultra-processed ingredients altered the gut microbiome's composition within 72 hours, significantly increasing intestinal permeability, allowing even more endotoxins to enter circulation. According to a 21 analysis in the British Medical Journal, people who consume the highest proportion of ultra-processed food had a 39% higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease. This damage begins within days of consistent exposure. The second habit is chronic sleep restriction. Most people think it just makes them a little tired, something coffee can fix. What it actually does is this. During deep sleep, specifically slow-wave sleep, the brain activates the glymphatic system, a waste clearance network that physically flushes metabolic byproducts from brain tissue, including amyloid beta proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. When you sleep fewer than 7 hours consistently, this clearance cycle is incomplete. A study from the University of Pennsylvania found that sleeping 6 hours per night for 2 weeks produced cognitive deficits, equivalent to 48 hours of total sleep deprivation, while the subjects themselves reported feeling only slightly tired. Additionally, sleep deprivation raises interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha within a single night of disrupted sleep. The damage to inflammatory regulation begins in under 24 hours. The third habit is sitting for more than 8 hours a day. Most people think sedentary time is just a fitness issue. What it actually does is suppress an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, the enzyme responsible for breaking down fats in the bloodstream. Without it active, triglycerides accumulate in the blood, driving metabolic inflammation. A study in the Annals of Internal Medicine involving nearly 8,000 adults found that those who sat for extended uninterrupted periods had significantly higher all-cause mortality risk even among individuals who exercised regularly. The inflammatory response from prolonged sitting begins within 60 to 90 minutes of uninterrupted sedentary time. The fourth habit is chronic psychological stress with no recovery. Most people think stress is mental, not physical. What it actually does is this. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, is anti-inflammatory in short bursts. But when cortisol is chronically elevated due to persistent psychological stress, immune cells develop cortisol resistance. They stop responding to cortisol's regulatory signal. The result is that the body loses its primary mechanism for dampening inflammation. Research from Carnegie Mellon University, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, demonstrated that individuals under chronic stress had immune cells that were unable to respond to cortisols. regulatory control producing significantly more inflammatory cytokines in response to even minor triggers. The downregulation of cortisol sensitivity begins after as little as 2 weeks of sustained psychological stress. But the damage does not stop at your habits. Your body has been sending you signals this whole time, and most people are completely ignoring them. Your body is not silent about this. It has been talking to you for a long time. The problem is nobody told you what to listen for. The first warning sign is waking up exhausted despite adequate sleep. You know that feeling when you close your eyes for 8 hours and open them feeling like you barely rested? That is not laziness. That is a measurable biological phenomenon. When inflammatory cytokines are chronically elevated, they interfere with the architecture of sleep, suppressing deep slow-wave sleep and increasing lighter, more fragmented stages. The body never fully recovers. Researchers call this inflammatory fatigue, and it is one of the earliest clinical signals of systemic inflammation. The second warning sign is brain fog and difficulty concentrating. When neuroinflammation is active, microglial cells interfere with synaptic transmission, the speed at which signals move between neurons. Tasks that once felt automatic begin to feel effortful. Words come slowly. Focus drifts. This is not aging. This is a biological disruption that begins measurably before any cognitive diagnosis. The third warning sign is persistent low-level digestive discomfort. Bloating, unpredictable digestion, or a stomach that feels sensitive to foods you used to eat easily. These are signs of intestinal permeability and microbiome disruption. The gut lining, when inflamed, loses its tightly sealed junction integrity. Your digestive system is signaling an immune state, not merely a dietary one. The fourth warning sign is joint stiffness in the morning. Morning stiffness lasting more than 15 to 20 minutes, particularly in the fingers, wrists, or lower back, is a classic early sign of systemic inflammatory activity. The synovial fluid around joints becomes affected by circulating cytokines, and the stiffness represents your body's attempt to resolve localized inflammatory buildup overnight. The fifth warning sign is mood instability, or a persistent, low-grade sense of flatness. The gut-brain axis, the bidirectional communication pathway between your microbiome and your brain, is significantly disrupted by chronic inflammation. Serotonin, your primary mood-stabilizing neurotransmitter, is 90% produced in the gut. When gut inflammation is present, serotonin synthesis is impaired. What many people experience as low mood or emotional dullness is frequently rooted in an inflammatory state, not a character flaw. If you recognized even 2 of those signs just now, keep watching, because what comes next is the part your doctor probably never told you. Now here is the part of this conversation that almost never happens inside a doctor's office, and there are real structural reasons why. This is not a criticism of physicians as individuals. Most doctors are working within a system that was simply not designed to have this conversation. Understanding why that is true matters, because it changes how you approach your own health. The first structural constraint is time. According to a study published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine, the average primary care visit in the United States lasts between 15 and 17 minutes. That time includes updating medications, reviewing test results, addressing the chief complaint, and documentation. There is genuinely no room within that window to walk a patient through the 5-year arc of silent inflammatory damage, the role of diet in cytokine regulation, or the specific sleep architecture changes that accelerate cellular aging. The second constraint is the design of the system itself. Modern medicine was built around the treatment of acute conditions, infections, injuries, emergencies. Chronic disease prevention, particularly through lifestyle medicine, is a relatively recent area of formal clinical practice. A physician's training is heavily weighted toward pharmacological intervention, identifying what is wrong, and prescribing what treats it, rather than identifying pre-disease biological states and addressing their root drivers. The third constraint, and perhaps the most striking, is nutritional education. A study published in Academic Medicine found that United States medical schools provide an average of fewer than 20 hours of nutrition education across the entire 4-year degree. Many provide fewer than 10. Yet diet is one of the most powerful modulators of systemic inflammation known to science. A physician who was never taught to discuss specific dietary patterns in relation to inflammatory pathways is not withholding information, they simply were not given it. A meta-analysis published in PLOS Medicine involving over 100,000 participants demonstrated that a Mediterranean-style dietary pattern reduced circulating C-reactive protein by an average of 26% over 12 weeks, a result comparable to some pharmaceutical interventions. This is not fringe science. It is published, peer-reviewed evidence that the structural design of standard clinical care is not consistently delivering. This is not about blame. This is about filling a gap that the system was never designed to fill for you. So now let us talk about what the research actually shows works, not opinions, not trends, not influencer advice, real evidence-based solutions. The first solution is the anti-inflammatory dietary pattern. This means a consistent eating pattern that prioritizes omega-3 rich foods, polyphenols, fiber, and fermented foods, while reducing ultra-processed ingredients, refined sugars, and industrial seed oils. Omega-3 fatty acids, particularly EPA and DHA from fatty fish, are the biological precursors to compounds called resolvins and protectants, which actively resolve inflammation at the cellular level. Dietary fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, which directly suppress inflammatory signaling in the colon and bloodstream. A randomized controlled trial published in Gut found that consuming 30 or more distinct plant-based foods per week significantly increased gut microbiome diversity and reduced intestinal permeability markers within 4 weeks. Another trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that replacing refined carbohydrates with fiber-rich whole foods reduced interleukin-6 by 22% in 8 weeks. Begin with one non-negotiable addition before any restriction. Add 1 serving of fatty fish twice per week and introduce 1 fermented food daily, such as plain yogurt, kefir, or kimchi. Build from that foundation over 4 to 6 weeks. The second solution is Zone 2 aerobic exercise. This means sustained, low-intensity aerobic movement, walking briskly, cycling, light jogging performed at a pace where you can hold a conversation but feel slightly breathless. Zone 2 cardio activates AMP-activated protein kinase, an enzyme that directly suppresses the NF-κB inflammatory pathway. It also stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria, which improves cellular energy efficiency and reduces the oxidative stress that drives inflammation. A study published in Brain, Behavior, and Immunity found that 150 minutes per week of moderate aerobic exercise reduced circulating inflammatory markers by an average of 35% over 12 weeks. 150 minutes per week, divided across 5 days. 30 minutes of brisk walking daily is sufficient. Results begin appearing in inflammatory biomarkers within 3 to 4 weeks. The third solution is structured sleep protection. This means treating sleep architecture as a non-negotiable physiological priority rather than a lifestyle variable. Deep slow-wave sleep is the only phase during which the glymphatic clearance system operates at full capacity. Inflammatory cytokines are actively downregulated, and cortisol sensitivity in immune cells is restored. A consistent sleep window, same bedtime and wake time, within 30 minutes, every day including weekends, is what the research supports. A study from the University of Pittsburgh found that sleep regularity was a stronger predictor of inflammatory markers than sleep duration alone. The fourth solution is evidence-based stress regulation. This means daily practices that restore cortisol sensitivity in immune cells and downregulate the sympathetic nervous system. Slow, controlled breathing, specifically a pattern of 4-second inhalation and 6-second exhalation, activates the vagus nerve, triggering parasympathetic tone that directly counteracts cytokine release driven by sympathetic nervous system activation. A study published in Psychoneuroendocrinology found that diaphragmatic breathing practiced for 20 minutes daily over 8 weeks significantly reduced salivary cortisol and interleukin-6 levels compared to controls. 20 minutes daily. No app required. Inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6. Begin before bed to simultaneously support sleep architecture. These are not hacks. These are not shortcuts. These are the things your biology actually responds to, and the research proves it. Here is the truth at the center of everything you just heard. Your body is not randomly failing you. It is responding precisely and predictably to inputs it was never designed to handle at the scale modern life delivers them. Ultra-processed food around the clock, artificial light past midnight, unrelenting psychological pressure with no recovery, and hours of uninterrupted stillness in a body built for movement. The breakdown is not a mystery. It is a mechanism, and mechanisms can be interrupted. You now know something that most people around you will never take the time to learn. You know that the fatigue, the fog, the stiffness, and the mood, those are not personality traits or signs of getting older. They are biological signals from an immune system asking for different inputs. Here is my question for you, and I want you to answer this in the comments right now. Out of the 4 daily habits covered in this video, the ultra-processed diet, the sleep restriction, the prolonged sitting, or the unmanaged stress, which one do you know, honestly, is doing the most damage in your life right now? Next, we are going to talk about what chronic stress is doing to your hormonal system specifically, and what you find out will surprise you even more than today. The information exists. Now you have it.